I left my career at 30, which is still relatively young, I think. I still feel pretty young. And I just picked up and went. And then I traveled and I got involved in gyms. And I think, okay, this is going to be successful. And it was not. And at 37, I'm basically starting over.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Multiple Careers podcast. In today's episode, I'm talking with Steve Bierfeldt and how he changed his career from politics to working for himself, among others, as a consultant. At the age of 30, Steve Bierfeldt left a 10-year career and chose to start over as he grabbed a backpack and traveled the world for a year. The experience helped him to understand and appreciate the journey of each person he now meets. Along the way, he's been a featured author, interviewee, or subject for more than 100 news outlets, including CNN, Fox News, The New York Times, Focus on the Family, The New Yorker, and The Wall Street Journal. For anyone who thinks it's too late to relaunch your career, this episode will completely change your mind. We talked about how Steve managed to start over, how he got through dark times and faced his challenges and fears, as well as really useful ideas for how to make the money work when quitting your job. Enjoy the podcast. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Hello, Cheyenne. Good to see you again.
It's so good to see you again too, Steve. I'm so excited to have you on the Multiple Careers podcast today. So again, thank you so much for agreeing to take your time and being here to come on my podcast. So you have a really unique and also very inspiring career, I would say. And I thought that it's just really important to share that with the world, with other people, because your unique experience, I think, can really help other people too in their own journey and in their own career. So you had this very successful career, right, for 10 years. But despite that, you decided to just leave it all behind and to completely start over again at the age of 30, right? And I think that's something that secretly so many people wish to do deep in their hearts, but they just don't have the guts to do yet, right? So I really want to know about all the details about how you manage that change, that transition, how you navigated through all the challenges in your career and your life. But maybe to start off, just to give our audience a quick overview, could you tell us a bit about who you are and what you're busy with at the moment now?
Sure. So my name is Steve Bierfeldt, with the B as in Bravo. I've had multiple careers over the years, which fits with your podcast. Right now, I'm doing a little bit of the next step, the next phase YouTube stuff on myself. My YouTube channel is Money Made Simple, Life Made Simple. And I'm going through a little bit of the process, learning some of that YouTube stuff. I've had some good successes there. And I've been through a number of careers over the years, a number of refreshes and restarts from 30, mid-30s. I did have to do it again at 37, which I'm sure we'll get into. And the idea is a lot of people want to do this, but a lot of people are scared. The job, the career is probably the one that frightens people more than anything else I've found out, more than moving to a new city or changing their family structure or having kids or doing this or that. It's leaving a job because, we're at our job 8 to 10 hours a day. We get home, we probably think about our job. We plan our vacations around our job. We plan time with our spouse and our kids around our job. So everything revolves around the job. And that's what I find most people are more scared of leaving.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so exciting. And before we go into your history, I want to ask you a bit more about Money Made Simple. Could you tell us a bit about what is that all about and how are you trying to reach out to people and help them with, I guess, their finances, right? Their personal finances.
Yeah, originally started with finances. So years ago, dating myself, 10, 15 years ago, I started offering advice to people just, off the cuff. Oh, you should, do X, Y, and Z to open up a bank account. Or you should do this, this, and this to open up an index fund. Or, I just did this trip to Europe and I spent $250 because I did X, Y, and Z. And everyone would always ask me, Steve, you should really start a blog or something. You should, share these ideas. And I'm like, no one's going to read my blog. I'm going to blog. What am I, a blogger? And now, obviously, blogging and YouTube is a big thing. But this is, 10, 15 more years ago. And overall, I started that. It's just my name, stevebierfeldt.com. I started blogging about finances, which I really liked. And then it's kind of merged a little bit more into not just money, but making life simple as well. So now I'm merging that into some YouTube stuff where I share ideas with people that money or finances or life in general doesn't have to be complicated. Someone who says, I can never learn how to make an investment. Well, it doesn't have to be difficult. It can be simple. I can never do this, or I can never do that. All these things don't have to be difficult. A lot of times people don't save money. They don't go on trips. They don't change their job. They don't start a YouTube channel because their thought is, well, it's too difficult. You see someone on YouTube with 1 million viewers and you say, well, I'm never going to get to that. So why would I even start? Well, you're never going to be as rich as Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk either, but that doesn't mean you don't save money. You're only comparing yourself to yourself, no different than a physical goal or a mental goal or anything like that. So that's kind of how it started years and years ago. People asked me for advice and told me I should put it down on paper or on video. And then eventually I gave in and I decided that there might be some value to it.
That's so great. I think that's so meaningful because finances is something that people really underestimate, right? People are so focused on their career, whatever is going on in their life, and they completely forget that there's that financial aspect to manage, right? And I always say that finances is like the fuel that keeps you running throughout your multiple career changes. Yeah, so I think later on we'll get into even more detail about that, about the work that you're currently doing now, and to our audience, make sure that later on you check out Steve's website, and I'll put that down in the descriptions as well. But first of all, let us now go all the way back to the very start. I'm always very interested in the backstory, right? How you got to this point. So can you perhaps share with us a bit about what you were doing in your old career before you left your successful career, and what you were doing at the time, what kind of work, and then also what happened that made you to decide, okay, I'm going to leave this?
Sure. I was in politics for probably about close to 10 years. I went to school for it. I got a degree in it, and I worked in the field for 8 to 10 years. So about 10 years, I was in politics. And after 10 years, I decided I knew what I did not want to do with my life, which was be in politics, which was be around the people. And I've worked on political campaigns for Congress and Senate and president and state political parties and fundraising and things like that, and everything in between, nonprofit work. And I've really kind of run the gamut from start to finish. And I decided I knew what I did not want to do with my life, which was be in politics. And I saw the people who spent their lives and their careers in politics and the kind of person that they were and the kind of person that they wanted me to become. You see some of these things on like House of Cards, especially the first couple seasons. Obviously, it's exaggerated, but a lot of the behind the scenes stuff is correct. That when they ask you to do, that's against your moral code, if you say yes, then they got you, and they can always make you do, because they'll always bring up, oh, well, you did this one thing that was wrong. I hate for that to come out. So a lot of my time in politics, kind of like steam would come out of people's ears when they'd ask me to do something. I'd say, oh, I'm not going to do that. And like, well, what do you mean? Everyone else does that. Like, oh yeah, but I'm not going to do that. So I decided I didn't want to be in politics. That's the short version. And I was working on a political contract that was coming to an end. And I decided that when it came to an end, I was going to get out of politics. I was going to grab a backpack and I was going to travel the world for a year. That was like my plan. And I had some prep time. So I knew it was coming, 3, 4, 5 months in advance. And everyone told me, you're crazy. You went to school for this. You spent this many years in this. To be frank, you're pretty good at it, Steve. And I had some very well-paying jobs in politics that I was very good at, I thought, and got a lot of prestige. And to kind of give that up, it takes a lot. How do you walk away from that prestigious job? How do you walk away from that 6+ figure salary? How do you walk away from these things? And my perspective was, I'm smart, I'm capable, I'm hardworking. I'm going to be successful at anything I do in life. So why would I spend time doing something that doesn't bring me joy any longer? So when the contract ended, I got out of politics. Everyone said, you're nuts. They said, it's in your blood, Steve. You'll be back. You'll be back. And I have not been back. I've not been back yet as far as working in politics. And that was the end of my career in politics. And from there, I did some traveling. And then I was at about the age of 30. And then from 30, I got involved in other things after that.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. I bet that it took a lot of honesty to admit to yourself that, okay, this, even though it's going really well here in my career now and it's prestigious and everything, despite that, okay, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. It doesn't fit with my values, right? And I have to leave. But I'm just curious to know, how did you decide to get into politics at first? And what were you hoping to find there actually working in politics? Because it seems that you were kind of disillusioned and not finding what you expected it to be.
Probably,
right?
Yeah, probably originally got interested in it in high school. There was a class called Model Senate where we would draft up a bill and then we would like argue and debate. And I liked arguing with people, I guess. Yeah, so that kind of got me prepped for it. And then when I went to school, I originally was a criminal justice major in my first year. I enjoyed that.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I got a little disillusioned with school just as far as the hoops to jump through. You know, I kind of saw college was a little bit almost like high school. Like the joke is, you're taking, trigonometry class in high school and you're adding shapes and cosines. And the question is, well, when are you going to use this? And the answer is never. You're never going to use them. Never. Like that's the running joke, but that's true. Unless you're a teacher for that subject or you're going into that subject.
Research, mathematics.
Yeah. Or the one day at bar trivia where that's a question. So I was a little disillusioned with high school where I felt myself doing things that really just weren't efficient. And my thought was, I feel like there's a million other things we could be doing. Like we could be teaching students how to change their oil. We could be teaching them how to balance their checkbook. We could be teaching them computer programming. This is, 15 years ago. We could be teaching them how to invest in index funds. Like there's a million other things we could be doing other than, well, you have to take this class. Like I enjoy European history, but there's no reason why 13th century European history should be required in high school for someone. It's not necessary for the average American to learn, even though I like it. And I saw a little bit with that still continuing on to college where I had these required classes. I had to take this, I had to take that. And I was just like, oh, this again. So I got interested in criminal justice and then history and political science. And then those kind of merged together. And eventually I graduated with a degree in political science 4 years later. That's what my degree is in.
Okay. And then you started working in politics. And I could imagine, like, if I were interested in politics, my motivation, for example, would be that I wanted to do something that's good for people, that would benefit people or change things, right? To make the world a better place. I guess that most people would go into politics with that in mind. Am I right here, or is there a disconnect?
You would think so. I admit I'm jaded on it. If you ask me now, in 2022, I think most people in politics are genuinely bad people who want to control people's lives.
Thanks for being so honest.
Yeah. Way back in the day, I'd be a little less jaded, but I've seen the people who do it, and I've seen what it's become. And it's just the system itself is very much built on an ease of taking advantage of the system. Like, the congressmen who get in positions of power, they're making a lot of money. They have a lot of benefits. They have a lot of extras. They have all these staff. Like, why would they ever give that up? It's a pretty cushy job. And there are people, who generally want to do good, but I do wonder if the system itself is predicated on them kind of losing their way. A lot of times I was, around people in politics or around candidates who say, hey, we believe in this principle, but we're going to just give up on this principle just this one time. And we're going to do this other thing, which isn't as moral because we have to beat this other guy who's really bad. Well, then you've become that guy who's bad. And there's always a justification. Everyone always thinks they're the good guy, whether it's in politics or whether it's, wars or anything like that. Everyone thinks they're on the right side. Everyone thinks they're the good guy. Everyone thinks that there's a way to justify that. And that's why I've been a little jaded by politics. But I got involved in it because I liked it. I was good at it. I did see an aspect of efficiency that I could do. One of my favorite things in the world. It's kind of a side story. One of the jobs that I had was in a state political party in the Midwest. And the first day of the job, I went to the receptionist and I said, give me a list of all the bills that the company is paying. And she gave me a stack, like a phone book of all these bills. And I went through every single bill, whether it's the water bill or the gas bill or the electric bill or the garbage bill. And I called or cut or negotiated every single bill. So I would call up the garbage company and say, hey, we're paying you $75 a month. That's too much. Can you do it for 60? No. Yes. Okay. We're going to save $10. And it sounds like I'm in a little minor thing. Oh, you're just going to save $10 on negotiating the garbage bill. How is that a big deal? But I saw that from my time, and that's just one example, an experience of when you're working in politics, you're either working with donor money or you're working with tax dollars. You're working with people who they gave you their money, sometimes not willingly. You have an obligation to use that responsibly. So every $10 that I saved, I pictured my grandmother writing a check for $10 to me or to a political candidate because she thought he or she was the last hope for the world, the last hope that could make the world better for her or for her kids or for her grandkids. How could you not use that $10 responsibly? So I saw that as saving $10, and that's what I did. I negotiated and cut every single bill that I had. And that's something I've done over multiple jobs, coming in and cutting or canceling or negotiating. That's why I get a little frustrated with politics today when people say, oh, I just need more money. Everything from the environment to education to this rights to these rights. I just need more money, as if money's going to solve the problem. But you're not good at what you're doing with the money you have. You can easily cut 1 or 2 or 5% from the budget. And I saw it literally as my grandmother, writing checks. And I think I still have a picture of it somewhere. I remember someone writing me a check for like $3.19 with very scribbled handwriting because they probably had Parkinson's. And I remember, that hits you. If that doesn't hit you, how can you not use that money responsibly? And I just saw so many people in government or politics not use money responsibly because it's not my money. Who cares? Who cares if it's $1 billion over budget for this government department? It's not my money. I'm not paying for it. And that's why I got disillusioned with it.
Yeah. I think that they kind of lost that connection, right, between the source where the money comes from and what they actually have to use for their programs and everything. I do think that it makes such a big difference. What you did with the bills and everything, because it does add up over the months, over the years, right?
Absolutely.
And if everyone was like you in the administration, then I think we wouldn't have all of these problems.
I could solve all the problems. I joke with people. People ask, what was your favorite thing about being in politics? And I've met, presidential candidates and senators, and I've, flown to conferences like that. And, what was your favorite job? And I tell them honestly, my favorite job in politics was negotiating the garbage bill. That was it. That was and I gave them the story that I just gave you, was negotiating the garbage bill, cutting $5 or $10, because if it could be done, why wasn't it done? Don't tell me that the government can't cut the budget by 1%. You could cut 1% from the budget just by changing the brand of paperclip that government's offices use. Seriously, change the ink cartridge in the toner. There's always something you can cut. 1%. You tell me you can't cut 1%. So it's just the people in politics. Again, my opinion of people in politics is low, but it's inefficiency at its highest, and that's what I enjoyed most from politics, is negotiating the garbage bill. And saving my grandmother, quote unquote, $10 because I wanted to make sure her money was used responsibly because she trusted me to use it.
Oh, yeah. It's really great to have such an insight, right? Because I was always thinking about whether what we think politics is about, is it really like that, or is it just our assumption? So now I hear it first-handedly from someone who's been there, right? So that's great. But have you ever experienced did you ever experience any dilemma about whether or not you should go along with something, or should you say no? And how did you handle it back then?
I don't want to toot my own horn completely because I'm a human. I'm an imperfect person. I make mistakes, but I will say it's something that, whether it's been politics or other jobs that I've had where I saw companies taking advantage of their employees, I've never allowed that to happen. It's something that I'm very proud of. It's something that I hold to, whether it's been political jobs, it's been in, factories that I've worked in, whether it's been other things like that. When there's something that's going wrong, with something that's happening that you need to bring light to, I think you have an obligation to bring light to it. And when I was I remember in politics, one of the jobs I had, I actually had the final sign off for the most part on mail that went out from congressmen and local candidates. So I worked for a state political party, and to get our stamp on it, I had to sign off. So people would send me their letters and their mail that they want to send out. You get a big postcard in the mail from the person running for town council or Congress or something. And I would have to say, yeah. And there was actually a sitting congressman whose office sent me a postcard, and I declined it. I said no, because I didn't think it was honest. I thought it was a deceptive postcard. And it caused a little bit of back and forth. What do you mean you're not going to approve it? Like, what do you mean you're not going to approve it? And then it comes into, well, Steve, you remind me of me when I was your age. I was a little naive too, but one day, Steve, you can be a state representative if you play your cards right. Or you can be an assistant to the congressman and it pays six figures. And steam comes out of their ears when they don't realize that you're not motivated by power or money. You're motivated legitimately by doing what's right. So that's a story that comes up where I said no. And there was a little back and forth. And eventually they said, okay, it's your decision. You don't have to do it. So I can't say, off the top of my head, every single decision I made was immediately like perfect. But it is something that I feel good about, that when I was asked to do things, I said no. And I was asked to do things in politics that were unjust and immoral. And to be frank, sometimes illegal. And I didn't do them. And sometimes the people who asked me to do them, they got their comeuppance and they got what they deserved. But I feel good about sticking to my principles. And that's something that you always have. You can always make more money. You can always get another job. But once you trade that principle, is your principle worth $1,000? Is your soul worth $1,000? That was worth it. Is it $10,000? How do you place a value on that? Some people do place a value on that. Yeah, it's a $300,000 job, or it's $1 million a year. It's a private jet. That's my value. That's what my soul is worth. And I feel good about that, even though there were times where it was difficult for me to get over. But I still feel, looking back, that I made the right decision on them.
Yeah, that's the irony, right? I mean, that those people like you who are honest, who have good values, in the end leave. They're exactly the people that are needed, right? In politics. But yeah, I guess that you made the right decision. That was best for you. But how did you, was there ever a tipping point where you decided, okay, this is it. Like, this is not, I can't take this any longer. I have to go. Was there anything specific that happened, or did it just accumulate over time that made you leave?
There was one instance where I was working on a political campaign, and I was asked to do some things that were not kosher. I'm not actually kosher, but they were not, correct. And I said no. And then the next day I was asked to, resign from my position. And my position was, hey, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm good at my job. Why would I resign? And it took a couple of years, but actually 3 or 4 of my supervisors end up being found guilty of federal crimes. And I think 2 of them went to federal prison. If someone wants to Google it, they can figure out who they were and what happened. But it took years. It literally took, that was a difficult time because I was asked to do something. I said no. The next day, all of a sudden, there's, we're getting rid of Steve because of, we're asking him to leave because of, this, which is not true. And it took years. And it's hard when it's a he said, she said, people don't know what to believe. When there's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people all saying one thing and you're saying the other, people say, well, Steve, I want to believe you, but it's 5 or 6 people against you. Like, someone has to be lying. Like, we're just playing percentages. And that's difficult because you're in the right. You're telling the truth, but people doubt you. So that took literally years to kind of come out and determine who was not telling the truth. But like I said, a few of them were found guilty of federal crimes, and a couple of them went to prison. So obviously, we know who was correct. That was a difficult time for me. That's where I actually took a little bit of time off to travel. And then I actually wasn't done with politics at that point yet. I still got back into politics with a different job. And when that job came up, I was in that job for about 2 years. And that was something where I enjoyed because I was actually working with some good people. My bosses at the time were very good, people I still talk to and I respect a great deal.
Was it also campaign work?
The first one was a campaign work. This one right now, the most recent, was a state political party in the Midwest. And I really enjoyed it. I was really good at it. And, I like cutting bills and putting things like that together. But I knew it was going to come to an end at some point. And it was just a matter of, it's going to be a year job, it's going to be a 2-year job. So I was kind of prepping for it. It's not a lifetime job. And I decided after, so long that, hey, this was enjoyable. I enjoyed doing a good job. I enjoyed being efficient and honest with it. But it seems like other people may not enjoy that. So the state chairman at the time, who's a friend of mine still, he was moving on to something else. And I knew that when my time came up, for my contract to end, I was going to move on to something else. And that's when I got out of politics formally, full time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was quite a process, right? It was not like from one day to the other, I quit and then I'm gone forever. It was a lot of like contemplation.
Yeah, because
Between going back and
there's
forth.
probably been more than a half a dozen different jobs that I've had and been pretty good at. And every time that contractor job ends, you have the opportunity: do I want to get involved in something else? This is all I've known for 5 years, and then this is all I've known for 8 years, and then this is all I've known for 10 years. And the longer that it goes, the more difficult it is to change that jobs. And I saw people who, asked me to do things that were wrong. I saw, guys who were on their third or fourth marriage, or probably would have been on their third or fourth marriage if their wives knew what they were doing on the campaign trail. I saw some of that stuff that's in, House of Cards in the movies is true. Guys leaving their wife and 5 kids for the woman who's 30 years younger that they've been seeing on the side. And you see this and you realize, I'm not going to be that person. I'm better than that. But why would you put yourself in that situation? Why would you put yourself in that situation? And I didn't want to be around those people. And that's why I decided that I've been blessed to be around good people. Like I said, I've had some very good bosses in politics that I respect a lot. But for me, it was not something that I felt beholden to. And it wasn't something that once I got over the initial, I went to school for this. This is my education. This is my degree. I've been in this for 10 years. I'm just going to, leave it. There's a little bit of trepidation in that, but it just became a point of, I'll find something else. I'll do it.
Yeah. How did you overcome that part specifically? What you just said right now, that you overcame that feeling of, okay, I studied this, therefore I need to continue on this track, right? Because there's so many people like on my YouTube channel also commenting about that kind of dilemma that they have had, that they've been studying and investing so much time in this career already. So wouldn't it be like a waste to throw everything out of the window and start something completely new? So how did you deal with that?
It's good. There's so many parts to answer that. I would say to some degree, yes, it is a waste. That's actually the way I would answer that question. And that's okay. If you do that, almost treat it like they call it the gambler's fallacy. If I go gamble at a casino and I lose $1,000 on the roulette wheel, and people say, "Oh, I got to win my money back. I got to win my money back." Nope, that money's gone. You're probably not going to win it back. But if you're not careful, you'll lose $2,000. So I would say, is to some extent, if you've spent 5 or 10 years in a degree and you say, "Well, I will have wasted this," you're right. But that time has passed. There's no time machine. You can't go back. Why not use that as an experience and say, look, well, if I've wasted, so to speak, 5 years, it doesn't mean it's a waste. You've learned experience. You've had education. You've learned what you don't want to do in your life. You don't want to waste 10 years. Sometimes knowing what you don't want to do with your life is much more important than knowing what you do want to do with your life. We ask, 17 and 18-year-old kids, they're kids to us, what do you want to do now? You graduate high school. What do you want to do with your life? I have no idea. I'm 17 years old. That's okay. Do you know what you don't want to do with your life? Oh, well, I don't want to live in this part of the country. Well, I don't want to be in an office. Well, I do like an office, but I don't want to work weekends. That's cool. Whatever your goal is. So I would say to some of your fans and your subscribers thinking about that is, don't be so tied up. I'm sure there's a million other people will say, no, you're not. It's not a waste. It might be a waste. You might have wasted 3 or 4 or 5 years. You could argue that I waste 10 years of my career. But one, I have experience now. I know what I don't want to do. I did meet some great people. It's shaped where I am. I wouldn't be having this conversation with you right now if I wasn't in politics for 10 years and we wouldn't have met. You think about it.
That would be bad.
You're right. And even if it is a waste, it's never too late to start. It's where people get caught up. So, well, I've been in this career for 10 years. Well, 10 years from now, you're going to be in that career for 20 years and you're going to be unhappy for 20 years. Would it be better to be unhappy now? So a lot of people get caught up in that. Job and career more than anything else, as I mentioned, that's the one that gets people, because we brace our entire lives around that. And you can't take your kids, on vacation. Oh, I have to work. I get 1 or 2 weeks a year and that's it. I can't do this. I can't do that. There's a balance to that. Of course, you got to make money. But also what made it easier for me when I left politics was having some money saved up. So, for example, I decided I want to travel the world for a year, literally like you see in the movies, grab a backpack, put all my stuff in storage and go around the world. I wasn't out of the country for 12 months. I came back for a holiday. I came back for a wedding. But I was pretty much on the road for about a year, 3 months in Europe, 2.5 months in South America, a week and a half this way to Asia. And that helped a little bit, because if I had no money and I said, well, my job's ending, okay, I have no savings, I physically have to get a job. So that was something, as I got closer to the end game, the end time for politics, I knew I wanted to travel. I knew that, okay, I need to have some money saved up. And that gave me a goal. So about 6 months before I left politics, I knew I kind of want to get out of this. How much money can I save in 6 months? That would make people's lives a lot easier. If they're they're in a career they don't like, and like, you know what, I want to get out of this, but what can I do to save some money to prepare for this? If you got to pay the bills, you got to pay, you got to pay the rent, you got to pay the rent. But if you knew, okay, I can pay the rent and eat for, 3 or 4 months after I quit my job, that's going to make things a lot easier and a lot less stressful. At the very worst, you can always get another job. Everyone is hiring. Most of them are paying $15-20 an hour to flip a burger. Honestly, like, who would have thought McDonald's is paying $15 an hour?
Yeah, it's not nothing.
It's not the ideal, but if you had to do it, what's the worst that could happen? You quit your job, you want to do X, Y, and Z. What's the worst that could happen? It doesn't work out? Get another job.
Yeah, totally. And it's only temporarily. I mean, it's not like a forever thing. It's just something to bridge the situation, right?
Right.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you went into the details, because that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about next, about the phase before you left your career of 10 years and went on that trip for 1 year, right? So you said that 6 months before that you started planning. Could you walk us through a bit about how you planned the trip, and what were maybe your concerns or the things that you had in mind at that time to come up with that plan of, okay, I'll go on a trip?
Absolutely. I knew I wanted to leave. I knew I wanted to minimize and kind of become a minimalist in my expenses. So some of my stuff went in storage, my stuff got sold. And I found a great book. I think it's called How to Travel the World on $50 a Day. It's by a guy named Matt
on $50 a day?
Or Nepis. I forget. It's
okay. I should write it
Nomadic
down.
Matt. His name is Nomadic. It's a blog. Nomadic Matt. I'm giving him a free plug here. .com. He wrote a book. This is maybe 10 years ago. How to Travel the World on $50 a day. I don't know if it's been updated since then. And that just put an idea in my head of, okay, you can do that. Now, if you go to, people think travel has to be expensive. And we could have a whole podcast episode just on that. But travel is expensive.
We'll do that.
Travel is expensive if you go to New York or San Francisco or Rome or London or Venice or Paris. All the time, people say, I'm going on vacation. Oh, where? I'm going to Europe. Where are you going? You going to Paris? You're going to London? Very rare. Oh, I'm going to Belarus. Like, no, people wouldn't say that, right? We're so conditioned to think, oh, it's Western Europe, it's big cities.
Paris, Milan.
That's right. And that is expensive. But you can go to a lot of places that are not expensive. Southeast Asia. There's tons of blogs and books written about people who backpack around Southeast Asia for $1,000 for a few months. Like, it's not living in 5-star hotels. And depending on how old you are and depending on your travel situation, that may not be for you. If you're 50 and married with a couple of kids, you probably don't want to be staying in hostels, but you could do it if you had to. So what I determined was I wanted to travel, period. That was the goal. Didn't have to stay in hotels. There were specifics I wanted to. I'm probably not going to stay in a favela in Brazil. There's probably going to be places where I'm going to spend a little bit more money. But I was willing to go to places that weren't super expensive. So I did spend time in Europe, but I did spend a lot of time in Central America and South America. I spent a little bit of time in Asia, not on that year of travel, but since then I've spent time in Africa. And I saw the United States as well. One of my goals before I actually quit politics, when I knew I wanted to quit, but before I got out, was to hit all of the lower 48 states in the U.S. before I turned 30. And I did it. I did it like a week before I turned 30.
I bet not many people have done that.
Not quite yet, no. And then 2 months later, I hit Alaska and Hawaii. So I've been to all 50.
Whoa.
And there's so much to see in the U.S. Here in the United States. I'm sure there's a lot to see in Canada as well. But in the United States, we equate travel to something that's so foreign. But the United States is foreign to people in the United States. Tell me people from Seattle and New York and Arkansas and San Francisco aren't different people. Like they're very different people, especially now everyone's on political edge all the time.
And they've never been to Florida either, right?
That's right. That's right. So they're different cultures. There's different accents. There's different systems. I was previously living in New York, and now I'm in Florida. Just now, February 2022, it's a different world when it comes to mask mandates and vaccine mandates, and businesses are closed and businesses are open. It's a night and day difference. Depending on your politics, you might like one over the other, but they are very different.
It's like a different country almost, right?
It literally is a different country. Yeah. It's just the fact that we all speak the same language that we can, can get along. But when it comes to travel, there's so many places to see. Have your viewers and your listeners, have they been to the Grand Canyon? Have they been to Mount Rushmore? Have they been to all these different places? Have they literally driven across South Dakota? It's a long drive. It's pretty flat, but there's stuff to see there. Don't be so tied up to, well, I want to travel, but it has to be Paris. It has to be London. Well, you can still go there, but there's other places to see that are going to be a lot less expensive for you.
Yeah, you can go there eventually. It doesn't have to be your first destination, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how many countries did you travel to again in total?
In total,
1 year, right?
In the 1 year, probably close to 30.
Close to 30. Wow, maybe a lot.
High 20s.
That's really a lot.
So longer travel is typically better because you can experience a lot of it. But there were times where I remember I had a trip. I was in Iceland, and I rented a camper van to drive around Iceland. And I forget what happened. Something happened where they didn't have the van that I rented. So they gave me another van that was a stick shift. And I didn't know how to drive a stick shift, very well. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to wreck your gears on your car. Let me not take this van around Iceland. So I went to, I think it was Denmark for the weekend. I went to Copenhagen. Now, I only spent 3 days in Copenhagen. I didn't experience the whole country. But the alternative was not to go to Copenhagen. Do I just sit in my hotel in Iceland? So I was in not too long ago, actually 2 years ago, right when the pandemic was happening, March of 2020, I was in India, Nepal, and Sri Lanka for I think 8 or 9 days total. And people said, well, that's not enough time. And I was like, well, I agree, but I only have 9 days free. So the alternative is to not go to India and Nepal or to go. It's better to go for 9 days, right? And I went to, I was in all 3 of those countries. I did hang gliding, paragliding. I don't know. You get a big parachute, jump off a cliff, and you move around in Nepal. That was awesome. I was there for Holi Festival in Delhi with the colors. They just throw colors on you. So that was cool. Went to the Taj Mahal. Wow. Stuff I would never trade, for anything in the world. Yeah. So take advantage of the opportunities you have to travel. Don't be so tied in. Well, it has to be for a week or two. It has to be at a 5-star hotel.
Yeah.
It has to be there. You can do those things and you're going to get the bill for it. Or you can just see other places.
Right. That's so exciting. I think this deserves a whole dedicated podcast that we can do, like on your travel experience, your tips, and so on. But there's one important question I wanted to ask you about this whole travel experience. What do you think that it did for you in the end, experiencing all these different cultures? Like what did you get out of it in terms of life experience?
Huge. Yeah. And I would say that extends not just to outside of the country, although a lot of that, but even within the United States. Like I said, San Francisco and Arkansas and New York and Florida, completely different values. Anything that we see, a lot of times other cultures in the US, other people or other countries, all we know about them is what we see on the news. All we know is whatever channel we're watching, how they portray them, the story that comes out. And most of the news is bad. Most of the news is bad news. Someone is, John is good at his job. He makes spreadsheets. That doesn't get to make the news. John, jumps off a building. That makes the news. So everything's already bad. So to go to these other countries where all you would know about them is what you read in a textbook or what you were taught for 30 minutes in high school 10 years ago or what you saw on the news is a completely different version of what actually exists. Most of these places are pretty safe. Some of the most dangerous and dirty places I've been in the world have been American cities, frankly. Really? Yeah, absolutely.
Can you name a few?
New York City is my least favorite. I'll go on record now. So if I ever run for president, I'm not going to win New York City. But New York City is my least favorite city by far. I can't emphasize enough how
not just recently, but even
Ever.
back
No,
then?
I detest
Oh,
New York
okay.
City.
I've been to New York City once, I think 10 years ago or so. So it's worse now, even,
It's
I
worse. I
guess,
assume
right?
now it's worse. It's from what I hear. Yeah. But I didn't like it. I'll leave it at that. But all these other places from Asia, Africa, parts of Europe, Central and South America, places that are not the U.S. You're going to get into some. I was in Haiti for 4 days doing some charity work years ago, and Haiti's in a rough spot. And this is, it seems like every 10 years they have an earthquake. It's just they're in some rough shape, but the people there are still genuinely good people. They were some of the nicest people I've met, and that extends to so many places. The stories that I have from people who have helped me out or loaned me things, and I was like, that's weird. I would never get that experience in the U.S. But people are generally good for the most part, and that's what I've learned from traveling and experiencing other cultures. It's given me a much greater appreciation for other people, for other cultures who aren't that different from the rest of us. People go to their jobs. They want to, make money for their children. They want to educate them. They want to have a good time. They enjoy eating good food and listening to good music. And I really appreciate that. And as an American, I was a United States of America citizen. You and I talked about that before. As an American citizen from the United States, pretty much everyone in the world speaks English, if we're being blunt. You're going to go to some countries that don't or that are very broken, but everyone caters to you as an English speaker. So to go to these places like, I don't know, like I went to, China and Japan, there wasn't a lot of English spoken, but there was enough to get. And I'm amazed at people from all over the world, how they will apologize when their English isn't good enough. And I'm like, I'm in your country. I should be speaking your language. You're apologizing to me.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Because they view it as the international standard, right? English.
I guess so. Yeah.
They don't be able to speak English.
They don't owe me anything. But pretty much everyone caters to you as an English speaker. So it's a really an incredible time. Hopefully we're over the COVID stuff and the traveling. A lot of these countries are knocking back on travel restrictions. We can get back to where we were.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait for that, really.
I'm getting antsy. Yeah.
Yeah. So after you left your job, the 10 years, and then you went on the trip, at that point in time, were you still thinking about going back into politics, or did you already have some ideas about what the next stage of your life would be like?
I was pretty much resigned to not being involved in politics because I had a few months to kind of prep for it. Like I said, save some money, knew what I didn't want to do with my life. And there's definitely been instances of, do I get back into this? It's so easy to get back into it. But when I did the year of travel, thankfully I was able to, stay with family in New York to kind of get settled in New York State and start from there. I knew what I didn't want to do, and that was that. There was certainly, and it certainly is, a little bit of a apprehension. Well, what do I do now? But saving took that away. I knew I had money that I had saved that, hey, if I want to just sit in a hotel in Luxembourg for 2 months, I can do that because I've saved money for it if I really want to.
Yeah.
And it was after about 11 months, actually, I joked that I got a little bored because there's only so many churches and museums you can go to. But that's when I started getting into more business consulting over like Skype, where I would coach people on saving money or living their best life or credit card points or getting a new job or things like that. And that kind of got my brain sharp again, my brain going again. So every year or so, I get a little bored and I need a new project and a new challenge. And that's segmented into some other stuff.
How early on do you think that you had that idea and that hunch that you wanted to help people with that? Because I think that many people listening right now, they kind of think that they want to do something else. They have a hunch, but they're not completely sure yet if they're ready to do it because they've never done it before. Like, when do you figure out that, okay, this is actually something I want to do in the next stage of my career and life?
It's $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
$1 million question. Kind of, I would say is, if you can go back to it, what I had said earlier is it's not as important that you know what you want to do, but what do you not want to do? What you're doing now doesn't have to be what you're doing forever. Right, but do you know for a fact, hey, I don't want to be in this field. I wake up every day. One of the things that I've used with my coaching clients was, if you wake up in the morning and the first word out of your mouth is an expletive, it's time to go.
I know about that.
Right? It's
I've been there.
You wake up, alarm, son of a That's not a good way to start your life. You're already waking up stressed. That's bad. That's bad. And you can say, look, I got to get out of here. What's my exit plan? And I think a lot of people, they see it as there's no way out. Like I said, I'm so far in debt, I can never do this. And there's consequences, for debt and things like that, and your family situation. You might not be able to just quit your job and be a painter on the boardwalk at the beach right away. Like, you might have kids to feed, you might have rent to pay, but there's something you can do. Talking with people, what I found more than anything else was that almost every single person is spending so much more money than they need to in expenses and debt and things like that. And literally going through, when I would coach people, their budget and saying, okay, you're going to write out your budget, not what the budget you think is. I've sat down with people and literally said, okay, I want you to bring your credit card statement for the last 2-3 months, your bank statement, and we're going to go through line by line every single item. And after we go through this, just like I negotiated the garbage bill, line by line, every single bill, I said, oh, it looks like you're spending $400 a month on nonsense. Don't you think we can get rid of that? Well, I could. Well, if you got rid of that, then that job that you hate, you only have to work that part-time, and that makes up for the 400. So a lot of people, when they think, oh, there's no way out, there's always a way out. There's a trade-off. How much money are you spending on everyone? The running joke is coffee. Starbucks. You're spending a daily Starbucks. Well, if you enjoy the Starbucks and you get value and pleasure from the Starbucks, drink the Starbucks. That's fine. But what would you enjoy more? There was actually a blog post that I wrote years ago. It's still on my blog. I think it was called How to Trade Lunch for a Vacation. And it was based on a study or a report that someone did that the average person is eating out so many times per week, so many times per month. And over the course of a year, they're probably average spending about $1,000 on lunch alone. And my response was, well, even if you spent half of that, you only went out to lunch half the time, or you made your lunch, $500 is a decent long weekend vacation. You can get a couple nights in a hotel room. You could get a cheap flight, or you could drive somewhere. It doesn't have to be Paris for $500, but maybe you just go to Paris for one night and fly back for $500. That's a pretty cool experience. I would do something like that. So expenses is a big thing for most people. It ties into the finances. Everyone thinks that, well, I'm never going to make this much money, so I can never travel or I can never quit my job. But I bet there's something in your budget, but there's many things in your budget you could knock off. All the different streaming services, how much you're spending on cable, insurance. Just call your insurance company. Can you get $10 off? Can you get $10 off? Because people think they're not going to find a pot of money or an expense that they're cutting that's $1,000. Well, it's not worth doing. But $10, 15, 10, 15, 20, 17, 33. That stuff adds up. And then you don't have to maybe do the job that you don't like.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. Thank you. It's basically all about trade-offs, right? Like, what are you willing to trade for your freedom and a bit more time to do other things?
If you want the coffee, if you enjoy the Starbucks, enjoy it. Like, if that's what brings you pleasure and joy, that's fine. Yeah. But you say, well, I wish I could go on vacation this week, this month, this year. Well, you could have if you didn't have Starbucks for a year. That's the trade-off. You can afford pretty much anything, but you can't afford everything.
True. Yeah. Get your Starbucks, but stop subscribing to 5 streaming services, right? That you don't even use. You don't even use all of them. Yeah. I like the way you approach this, Steve. I think that a lot of people need a much more tough love to handle their problems instead of people just saying, you're fine, it's okay, you don't need to change anything, because that does much more harm than good, right? So I think to anyone listening right now, if you need any tips and help with your finances, make sure that you contact Steve. Again, we will leave his contact later down in the descriptions. Yeah, I think there's so much interesting stuff here. I almost forgot about my train of thought. I just wanted to go back a bit again, and I wanted to ask about that the savings aspect. You said that you saved up quite some money before you left, right? For your expenses, your trips and everything. Would you mind sharing with our audience about how much you saved up? It doesn't have to be in terms of dollars. It could be in terms of how many years of expenses, and also what you would recommend to people leaving their jobs.
So I think I remember exactly, if you have to check my math on this, I think it was $18,250.
Oh, wow. That's exact. Thank you.
I'm going to do my calculator here. So the reason is I used that example I gave earlier of $50 a day times 360. I don't know if that's exactly 18.
The cost for a trip, right?
Yeah. So if I did $50 a day, a year of travel, that would be about 18, maybe 20 or so. So about $20,000 is what I saved up.
Okay.
And I use that as an example. And you say, well, see, you can't $50. That's not even one night in a hotel in New York City. Well, then don't go to New York City.
Right.
You could say you could now Airbnb, you could rent a house. It's a little less expensive than a hotel.
Yeah.
Can you go with a friend for a month? Hey, my friend has always want to go to, Taiwan for a month. Okay, well then we can split the costs. If you're traveling with a spouse, you're traveling with someone, that cuts your hotel bills in half. Now I was traveling alone for the most part. So most of my expenses I had to, pay for myself, and I can eat a lot. So the food was a lot. But again, I said I balanced that out with I went to I think it was Vancouver and Seattle with my brother for a week. So we traded some expenses. A bunch of us went to Africa, traded some expenses there. 50 was just an example that I used. And you don't have to go to super expensive places. If you want to go to more expensive places, it could be $100 a year. I remember a blog post I wrote years ago. I think it was called why having 18 bank accounts shouldn't scare you. And what I did was I used for most of my banking Capital One 360, which is a great online bank. It's almost exclusively online, but you can still open accounts. And you can have, I think there's no limit on savings accounts. You can literally open a savings account in 30 seconds, and they let you make nicknames for them. So I made, I have 18, 20 of them based on expenses, and I gave them all nicknames. And I still have them, actually. I still use this bank. The nicknames are Beatles songs. So the Beatles songs, the Beatles songs are all coded with what it relates to. There's a Beatles song called "Drive My Car," and that was vehicle expenses. There's a song. There's a song called "Baby, You're a Rich Man," which is money that I put away for my niece and my nephew in the future. So all these different songs. Nice. There's a song called "Flying." And years ago, I got my pilot certificate, so I can fly.
Oh, that's cool.
Airplane. So I saved money. So the idea was, instead of just getting a pot of money in your paycheck and saying, "Oh, I have to save money," you can either do it automatically, or you can do it. $5 comes out of the bank account and goes into every single savings account, and the savings is done for you. There's a Beatles song called "Across the Universe," and that's my travel fund. So what I did was I segmented them specifically into each individual account. If you don't track your expenses, you're going to wake up and say, where'd all this money go? Well, you had 14 Starbucks, you ate out in 13 days this month, and where'd all this money go? If I said to you, hey, did you know you spent $700 this month on eating out? You'd say, whoa, I bet I can cut that out.
No way.
Well, we have to track that. Yeah. So people think that it's a lot of work, and it is sometimes, making spreadsheets and things like that. I enjoy them. The average person doesn't maybe enjoy them.
I love spreadsheets.
Yeah, I think they're great. I have color-coded spreadsheets and everything. And people will say, well, I could never do that. That's too much work. My response would be like, it is a lot of work, but the alternative is to not save and not travel. So would you rather have some work or travel? What you're measuring is what you're going to manage. If you don't track things, if you don't keep track of things, you have to know where your money is going. You have to know where your expenses go. So I still do this. Literally, I have 20 bank accounts saved with Beatles songs, and every bank account is kind of coded where the expense is going.
Do you have a Let It Be account?
I don't think I have Let It Be, because I haven't decided what
Let It Be, right? Because
I don't know what Let It Be is going to be. So they have to. The key is they have to be. I have to be able to remember what it is.
Right. It has to be.
If it's like, what is it? Let It Be? I'd be like, I don't know what it is.
What's
but
this?
Flying, for example, I know, that's going to my pilot training.
Yeah. I know that's a really, really great approach, and it's also fun, right? Like, a
lot of fun.
And like, it's really clear like what you're saving this money for, right?
Yeah.
So at that time when you were traveling, did you have any overhead expenses? I mean, like rent or stuff that you had to pay besides that, or was it just like the daily cost for the travel itself?
I didn't have any rent because I had 2 condos that I owned, one in Virginia, which I had bought years before that, and one in Iowa, where I had bought a condo and I was living in there for about a year, and then I rented that out. So I wasn't completely off the grid. I would still get emails from tenants, hey, this needs to be fixed, or this needs to be that. But I didn't have any major expenses. I didn't have a car expense. I didn't have a housing expense. So for longer travel, that's also going to save people a lot of money. It's picking up and going to this city and then flying to this city next week and then this city next week. That's what started adding up. But if you just picked up and go, I remember before I did the full year of travel, I went to Costa Rica for a month with some friends and just went for a month. And people, would say, oh, you can't just pick up and leave and go to Costa Rica. You can't go to a foreign country for a month. That's a weekend trip or a week at most. And my response was like, nah, I'm just going to do it. Like, what's the worst that could happen? And it was great.
Yeah.
And I would say that kind of segmented and started my travel. So longer travel is going to save people money if they think that, hey, I want to travel for a couple of months. You can do that. If you visit 4, 5, 6 different countries, it's going to be a lot more expensive than if you just say, hey, let's go to Vietnam or Cambodia for 2 months, 1 month each or something. That's going to save you a lot. Renting a house for a month is a lot less expensive than 30 different hotel nights.
You get a better deal too, right? You can negotiate. Yeah. How did you, I think I like your approach where you kind of saved up enough money to execute your plan of traveling for that 1 year, right? But then again, there are so many people who I know of who actually have money. They have a lot saved up, invested, they have property and so, but despite that, they still feel, no, I need to save up even more. I need to save up even more. I can't, it's a luxury if I just leave, even though I have the money and just go on a trip and then I'm wasting this money. Like they can't really imagine yet what the value is, of going on that trip and trying something else, doing their own project. They cannot really imagine the value of that yet. And that makes them stuck where they are and they just keep on working, accumulating more money. What will you tell them? Like, how can they overcome this kind of dilemma and get unstuck and doing what really matters, right?
Yeah. I have a friend who actually comes to mind. So I would say not everyone likes to travel. I don't understand it because I've probably been about 75 countries, maybe not quite 80, but 75 countries and territories. I'd love to see as many as possible. Some people don't like to travel. I have a friend she's a homebody. She doesn't like to travel at all. I can't comprehend it, but that's her thing. If you don't like to do something, don't feel like you have to. If you're hearing us talk and you're saying, well, Steve, I really don't care about going to Europe. I'm happy where I am. I just want to sit home and watch Netflix all day. Okay, that's fine. But I would encourage you to get out of your comfort zone. And I have another friend who, for years, she would hear my stories and I would tell her, you got to do this, you got to do that. And she's like, yeah, I'll do that. And she works very hard. She has saved her money for years. We would joke how much money she has saved up. She could, probably live, 2-3 years without working. And I think it was Amsterdam. She went for just a long weekend. And when she got back, because we had talked about it, she's like, well, Steve, I want to go somewhere. All right, you've convinced me. And I was saying, well, where you can go here, you can go there. And we determined that Western Europe was probably the best place to start. So for people who say, I've never really traveled a lot, I want to start somewhere, it's going to be a little more expensive, but Western Europe is not that big of a culture shock as from America or from Canada. Like everyone speaks English, everyone, they're going to have McDonald's and stuff. Like it's not like you're going to a third world country where it's really a culture shock, which is, I would still love and I encourage people, but if you've never traveled, that's probably not the first place you want to go. So I would say Western Europe. So we talked about going to London, which is a little too familiar. And then we talked about other countries, and she decided to go to Amsterdam. Went for, maybe it was a week, maybe a long weekend. And she got back and she's like, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, I've been telling you this for a decade. And now she's like, I can't wait to go to the next place. Where can I go? Where can I go? Just because she enjoyed seeing how so many things are just different. Like, in Amsterdam, they're biking around the city. You don't have that culture in a lot of other cities. Just sitting outside in a cafe, going through, the coffee shops or the red light district in Amsterdam. It's just a different experience. We're like, that happens in the world. Like
and people are just laid back about it, right?
Yeah, it's just a different thing. So I would say is if people are kind of on the fence. But is it for you? If you generally don't like travel, not everyone likes to do that. But if you want to do it, just do it. Doesn't have to be for a month. You don't have to quit your job. You don't have to get a backpack and go around the world for a week or for a year.
Yeah.
Just start. Can you go somewhere for a week?
Right.
I just want to try somewhere a little different than what I'm used to. It doesn't have to be Western Europe, but obviously that's what most people start with.
A good place to start.
Yeah. Do it. Just do it. There's never going to be a good time or a perfect time. Just do it.
Yeah. Traveling first, like taking a break before like starting the next thing is a really good idea. And yeah, there are people who maybe want to just leave their job to start working in another industry, in another field, but they have so much fear. Like
Right.
they feel so secure in their current job and they're almost like hanging on and clinging to it. Like, have you experienced any kind of fear before you left your career? Or was it like, okay, I'm just going for this new thing. I'm so excited. I don't care at all. Did you have any fear?
There's been back and forth on it. So there's been jobs where I decided I knew what I didn't want to do. And then I got into business consulting. Maybe more specific, there were clients that I was working with where I was like, I don't want to work with this person. I don't like this person. This person is a headache. But I did it because, well, they're going to pay the rent. What should I do? And then I kind of fell into it. There have been jobs that I've had where actually before I got out of politics, I was like, I'm out of politics. And one of my bosses offered me a job and I originally turned it down. And I was like, I'm done. And then he actually came back. He offered me a little more money. And then I took it. And I was like, oh, am I really out type of thing? Thankfully, it was a good guy that I enjoyed working with. So it was a benefit to it. But even now, there's some instances of you and I have talked about before where the jobs that I had, I owned a few CrossFit gyms in New York State for about 5 years. And they did not end well, actually, not even COVID related. I had some very bad business partners that literally stole from me. And it took me a while to get over the fact that I could blame them for everything, or I could look internally and say, you know what? No one forced me to partner with them. I have to take responsibility for that. That's my mistake. That's my failure. What can I do to move on? And at 37, I'm basically starting over. Big financial hit that I took. New career. I don't want to be in politics. I've been involved in owning gyms for 5 years. COVID's going on, and it just kind of came back to, well, if I'm smart, capable, and hardworking, I'll figure it out. I'll find a job. What can I do to cut as many expenses as I can so I don't feel compelled to take a job that I want? When your rent and your mortgage and your personal living, well, I want to go to the spa 4 days a week, Steve. You can do that, and you need to make the money for that. If you cut everything out, what can you do? So actually, as I'm talking with you now, I'm in Florida. I decided that since, my gyms had closed, and there was really nothing holding me to that area, I figured, well, why am I going to be in New York State when it's freezing cold in the winter? I'm just going to go to Florida.
Makes sense.
I just picked up and went, and I'm living in Florida for 4 months just to be a little warmer. And I'm doing some of the work I'm now virtually from whether it's Skype or business consulting. I did finding a client that I'm working with, doing some fundraising with him, doing some logistics work with him, and I'll be okay. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But, if you can do that, it's going to bring a lot more joy to your life.
Yeah, I totally believe that. Yeah. Could you share with us a bit, how did you initially get into the CrossFit business? Like what sparked your interest, or was it something that you always wanted to do, like go into that area?
I had heard of CrossFit back, this is, I don't know if it was 20 years ago, years ago. And one of my coworkers encouraged me to do it. And at that point, it was like $200. I think I was living in Arlington, Virginia, and it was $200 gym membership. I was making like $29,000 a year. So I was making, peanuts out of college. I'm like, $200, Gold's Gym is $20 down the street. Like, no, I got to do it. And I'm like, I'm not spending $200. And it's a good workout. It is a good workout. I did a workout today, actually, at a local CrossFit. And then years would go by, and I moved out to the Midwest. I was in Iowa. And I told myself, like, okay, like I need, besides work, I need another project to keep my mind sharp. And I heard of this thing called Krav Maga, if I'm even pronouncing it correctly. And it's an Israeli martial arts. And it's very intense, like super, super crazy. And like, that's cool. I want to do that. But I got to get in shape before that. I'm not in good shape for this. Let me try this CrossFit thing. And I got involved in CrossFit, and I enjoyed it. And I was doing that for years and years. And I was back home for, I don't know if it was Thanksgiving or Christmas. And my mother said, oh, there's a CrossFit down the street. So I ended up going to the CrossFit and meeting the owner at the time and talking with him. And I said, hey, look, I kind of do business audits and business consulting. Why don't you let me drop in for free? I don't have to pay anything for you. And I'll do an audit of your books. And within the first week, I had gone through his books, and he had been paying I think in New York State, from what I remember correctly, fitness clubs don't have to charge sales tax. In New York City,
Really?
they do. Correct. New York City, they do. But as long as you're not a sports club, you're a fitness gym or fitness club. At least that was the rule at the time. You don't have to charge sales tax.
Because it's a health thing?
Exactly. It's a health thing.
I see.
So I said, oh, looks like you paid like $5,000 or $6,000 these last few years. So literally I went through the books, looked up the law, gave them the code, did this, and saved them $5,000 in an hour.
Wow.
And that's originally how I got involved in investing in that CrossFit at the time. So that's kind of how I started. In CrossFits, and over the years, I had opened up a new CrossFit. I had purchased a CrossFit from someone else who wanted to sell it. So I had 3 at the time. Ironically, I actually got rid of 2 of them before the pandemic. So I guess I dodged a bullet there. I dodged quite a few bullets. Yeah. It could have been a lot worse. But the last one closed up this last spring. And then I figured the universe was telling me not to own CrossFits anymore, that it wasn't a good idea, that I needed to stop relying on other people, other business partners, although I've had good business partners in the past for other industries, that I had to take responsibility for my actions. I chose to go into business with these people. It's no one's mistake but my own. I can whine and complain and cry about how I was wrong, but can't go back in the past. And I needed to move on to something else. And I determined that, whatever the next project is, I just needed a fresh start. And I think it'll be good. So I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be yet. A little bit here. I think I'm doing some business consulting on the side, so I'm able to make some money and survive. But I'm excited for the next project.
That's a really great mindset to have. I mean, despite having some bad experience, still having the courage to keep going on, right?
I think so. Yeah, it was not always easy to get through. There were some very bad times and very dark times when you see all the work you've put in and the money that you've saved evaporates because someone literally steals from you and you have to take them to court. Is not fun. And I kind of got into quickly when I mentioned the political people who asked me to do things and I had to leave a job and it took years for the truth to come out. It was kind of the same with these business partners. They're saying one thing, I'm saying the other. People in the middle are saying, well, Steve, there's all these other people saying this. How are you telling the truth? And eventually both business partners actually end up writing me a check. We ended up settling and they wrote me checks. Okay. And the way I phrase it is innocent people don't write checks. Guilty people write checks. People who have done nothing wrong don't write checks. People who know they're wrong write checks. And
that's true.
You're spending more than lawyers than you are actually getting back. So it's not a good investment. But it came down to a moral decency of this is what's right. I'm going to fight for what's right, even if it's going to cost me more money. And at the end of the day, I could say I won, so to speak. It doesn't make a difference, but I feel comfortable stepping away, knowing that I did what was right.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect attitude to have. I mean, you got to stick to your principles, right? That's the only thing that you can hold on to. Other people can do what they want, but you have to hold on to your own values. Otherwise, what else have you got left, right?
That's right. At some point, what are your principles worth? Is it worth a fancy car? Yeah. Is it worth a new job? Is it worth a big salary? Like for some people it is, for a lot of people it is, but it shouldn't be, I think.
Yeah. I'm just trying to imagine this thing, going through this kind of thing. I mean, that must have been like so tough. I can't even imagine it. How did you process that? How did you deal with that? I mean, everyone has had some kind of really bad experience that wasn't even because of their own fault and wrongdoing, right? But things happen. How do you process that and then get back up and start again?
Yeah, difficult. It was difficult. It took a long time, and it dragged out for a couple of years. The last couple of years were definitely difficult, and you try to put on a good face because you're still running a business. It's not like you can just go off in a corner for your time and just sit there. You do the best you can. And how to get through it, I would say is, there's going to be an end at some point. What I would suggest to people going through that, if anyone's involved in lawsuits with business partners, is that it's probably not worth it. You're going to spend more on lawyers than you are going to get back. You can send, and I had people tell me, like, look, Steve, you're going to spend more on lawyers than you're going to get back from this person when they know that they're wrong and they're going to write you a check. And my response was, well, yeah, but it's the moral, the principle of the thing. It's like, that's fine, the principle of it, but it's going to cost you some money. Overall, I would say is that's one thing that helped me. I had some family and some friends that didn't know all the details, but they knew enough that they would help me through it. And it's good to have some support structure. Unfortunately, a lot, like in politics, there were definitely some people that I thought well of and I trusted and did not, turn out to be good people to trust. And that was tough because I lost a lot of faith in a lot of people that I previously valued and thought of as friends. But overall, there's nothing that's going to go on forever. Time heals all wounds. All these, it's like reading a Hallmark card. I can say whatever saying I want, but like
it's
I said,
actually true. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it's actually true. Sometimes you just need time.
I was telling someone the other day, I'm in Florida right now. I'm joking that I'm walking down the streets looking for like burning buildings of babies to save, because that's my reason. Like, oh, I'm in Florida for this purpose. Like all this had a purpose, all this had a reason. But like I said, I wouldn't be talking to you now if this didn't all happen. Maybe someone watches this and says, wow, that's what a great story, and it helps them. So if it helps someone else, that's at least something good to take from it. And there were people that I learned from and through experiences, just because the last couple of years were very difficult for me doesn't mean that nothing was gained from it. Certainly I know now what I don't want to do with my life. I don't want to have a business partner. I don't want to be tied to a specific place that I have to go in a certain part of the country. I don't want to let other people make decisions for me. I like my complete freedom and autonomy. I like the idea of, jobs that I've looked at even recently, hey, you know what? I don't want to go work in an office. No, I want to work from home. And if you want me, that's my specifics. You have to cater to me. And we see that a lot, actually, the great resignation everyone's talking about. A lot of people are saying, you know what? I don't want to do this job that doesn't pay me what I think is worth. And I have to work 50, 60 hours a week and weekends. Like, I'd rather do something else. So that's something I can take from, at least, is I know a little bit more of what I don't want to do. And I did admit I slipped into that when I got involved in the CrossFit gyms. I knew, hey, I want to travel a little bit more. I don't want to be tied to a location. But it's hard to manage a CrossFit gym from Costa Rica. You kind of have to be there.
You have to be on the ground, right? You have to check
exactly. And I was there for about 5 years. And I actually told myself when I came back, I'm going to give this 5 years. And almost like, I don't know if it was 5 years to the day, but just about, realized it wasn't working out. So God, karma, the universe was telling me that, hey, you're not meant to own CrossFit gyms. And you're not meant to work with these people in this part of the country. So that at least was a benefit that I took from it. And hopefully I've grown as a person to learn what I should have done or what I should have done better.
But that's a great thing that you did it anyway, I think, because you still learned a ton, I guess, from the whole experience, right? Even if it wasn't your thing. And also that you knew when it was time to quit. I think that not enough people know about that. They just try to stick to it for the sake of it, right? And don't know when to call it quits and move on with their lives.
Like the gamblers, or maybe it's called the gambler's fallacy, the sunk cost fallacy.
Oh, yeah, right. They keep on throwing money at it, right?
Exactly. I can't give it now. And I've gone through that, and I haven't always been perfect with that. I'll certainly admit the mistakes that I've made, but at some point, if it's not bringing you joy, you wake up and the first word out of your mouth is an expletive. That's not bringing you joy. Your career and your life is not bringing you joy.
Right. You're bringing up all the old memories now.
Yeah, right.
Totally. Yeah, I think one thing that would also be very valuable for our audience is to know, in case anyone is planning to quit their job and maybe start a new business and also plan to partner up with someone else. From your experience, is there any advice you could give them in like kind of vetting and choosing who to work with? Because that's so crucial, right? I worked with someone also on my first 2 feature films, and I know how it impacts you, because you're working with that person for the next like 3 to 5 years, and it can impact your whole life and mood. Like, what advice would you give to them?
Now, and I admit I'm a little jaded, I would say don't do it.
Don't do it at all.
Work for yourself.
Hire people instead, right?
Exactly. I have had good business partners, 2 specifically, that I'm still very good friends with, and I've done work with back and forth over the years, and it worked out well. For something like that, I would say is, sadly, no one is a man of their word. You can't. I've always. I mean, the idea of, I'm shaking your hand, I give you my word, like that's the bond. Like, it's done. Like there's no question, like, how would you not be a man of your word? But sadly, a lot of people are not. A lot of people are people. Humans are going to human, and some humans are deceitful and deceptive and greedy. And you know, we're all imperfect, but I would say is everything you do has to be like literally in writing. And ironically, even some of the stuff that came up with one of my business partners had ironclad in writing, but you have to prove that in court. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a contract. The business partner, in my case, one of them said, yeah, okay, sue me. Okay, well, I guess I have to. Like, if that's the result, you know, it's like if you were to sue Coca-Cola or something, or Coca-Cola sues you, they're Coca-Cola. They've got $1 trillion. Who are you? You can go head to head with them and spend the $50,000 on lawyers, but that's that. So I would say is a lot of the issues of get everything in writing, make sure it's ironclad, but even with that, it may not make a difference. And you could still win, but at the end of the day, it's probably not going to be worth it. Just ask yourself why you need to go into business with someone. A lot of people go into business with people because they don't have the financing. Well, could you get your finances in order over the next 6 months, cut expenses, and then you'd have the money for it? Or people want experience. Well, could you pay someone $100 a month, $100 a week, once every so often to have a Skype call and advise you? There's something to be said about owning your own business, that it's yours, because there's good and bad with that. But what I like is that success and that failure, it's yours alone. It's okay if your business failed. I've had successful businesses, and I've had businesses that have failed. It's all you. It's on you. So I would say to people who are considering a business partner is, why do you need that? If you do, make sure you get everything in writing, but know that nothing is ironclad, and may not be an expletive, but if you wake up every day saying, oh, I just want to make my own decisions, then you don't want a business partner. Like, you want to be able to make your own decisions, good or bad.
Yeah, that's something really important to consider, right? Like, how do you want to set yourself up in your new endeavor? Do you want to work with people? Do you want to do it by yourself? So these days now, if I understand correctly, you're doing a lot of consulting work, right? You're doing consulting and coaching. Could you tell us a bit about like the work that you're doing now and how you enjoy that in compared to like what you were doing back then?
Back then with the gyms?
Back then, and even further then, like maybe your first career, like maybe more of a corporate job, if you will, compared to office.
So I've almost always had jobs, I'd say almost always, that I've enjoyed. When there's been a period, you know, even when I was 15, I was pushing shopping carts. You know, I was 15. That's what you do. You make $5 an hour putting groceries in bags because you have no skills to offer the world. That's what you're doing. There's pretty much always been a situation where the jobs I've had are jobs I've really enjoyed. Were jobs that I chose to take on, were jobs that I decided I want to work in this field or this industry. And when that job no longer suits my interests, I move on to something else. If I wasn't growing as a person, or if I didn't feel like the company was sharing the values that I had, it's nice to have that ability. You know, a lot of times people kind of get tied up with big car loans and mortgages and this and this. And they say, well, I physically can't quit my job, Steve. I'm tied in. That's when people get stuck. So if you can eliminate those extraneous factors, that helps a little bit. For consulting, what I started doing, I mentioned earlier, when I was traveling the world, I got about 10 or 11 months in, got a little bit bored just because I needed my mind to be fresh. And that's when I started doing consulting over Skype, or maybe it was, you know, Google Video at the time, just helping people. Hey, Steve, I want to cut $50 a week out of my budget. Okay, let's go line by line like this. Or Steve, I have a big meeting or a big job opportunity that I want to take on. Can you help me prep for my interview? And I would do interview prep with people, things like that. A number of people got jobs afterwards, so they were my biggest fans, obviously. That was kind of the individual one-on-one. And then for my most recent consulting, I have one main client that I'm working with now, and hopefully looking to get more, that I'm helping out with his local theater, is actually someone that I've met owning the gyms. He was actually the landlord of the property of one of my gyms, who knew everything that I was going through for both bad business partners over the course of 2 years. You know, Steve, I know exactly what you're going on. I feel for you, trying to give me advice. Super cool guy, super helpful. And that's really what I take. I think I joked with you before that I was dating a girl for about 2 years that I met at the gym, and it was almost exactly lined up with when my first business partner, wronged me to when the gym closed. So
Great timing.
all she knew was me, kind of stressed out all the time. And my original thought was, well, you know what? I can look at this opportunity and this experience to saying the gyms were worth it. All the problems I went were worth it because, I met this girl. And she broke up with me. So I was like, oh, there's got to be something to take out of this. And I think what to take out of it actually was my landlord, who I'm friends with and I've spent time with, been to his house. And he owns a theater up in upstate New York. And they wanted some help, some kind of financial auditing and day-to-day stuff. So I've been able to kind of get right back into it. And okay, we're going to negotiate the garbage bill. We're going to cut this. We're going to cut that. And I'm also doing some fundraising for him as well. So that's what I'm looking to do now. Him and I talked about it. And I said, I'd love to help you, but here's where I am in my life. I'm not going to be physically on site. I want to be able to pick up and go. I just happen to be in Florida for the next 3 months. Maybe after that, I'll be in Colorado or Costa Rica or something. I don't know. And what I'm doing now is 99% virtual. So I decided what my worth was, not just dollar amount wise, but what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to wake up and, do a stretching routine or yoga and read my Bible and go to the gym and come home and go for a walk around the lake and do all this work on my time that I could do. I wasn't tied to a specific guideline, which you have when you have a boss. I've been people's bosses plenty of times. I want it done this way. It's my business. It's my company. You're my employee. It's just not something that I want to do now. I want the freedom of the location. Location freedom for me is a big thing. And so many people today are working from home. They're working virtually. You might not be able to afford where you're living because you're living in a big city. If you're living in New York City or San Francisco and you work virtually, well, you could move somewhere else. You could move to Tulsa, Oklahoma. You could move to, Littleton, Colorado, places that are half the price.
Right. Wow.
You don't care where you are, just go. So there's a lot of things you can do, especially if you move to a state that has no state income tax, which is a big thing.
Which states are those? Which are those?
There's 9.
9.
Washington, Nevada, South Dakota, Texas, Wyoming, Florida, New Hampshire, Tennessee, Nevada. I don't know if I said that already.
Cool. You really know your stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I also feel the same way. Like I really, really cherish the freedom that comes with like working on your own. But what I've also experienced is that with freedom comes also a lot of volatility, insecurity, instability. So how do you deal with that aspect of working for yourself? That maybe instability in terms of income, work, and everything.
Yeah, that's the toughest part. When I was before the gyms were kind of startups. So I joke with people that I used to be quite successful actually in life. I used to be quite successful.
I bet you still are. You're getting more and more successful. In a different way. Yeah.
In a different way. That's a good way to put it. Absolutely. So before the gyms, I had I think previous 3 or 4 jobs were high paying jobs, over 6 figures, good titles, things like that. So I'm used to making money. And I've had jobs where I've made 0 money. I've had startups that I've started with business partners and things like that. But making money is preferable to not making money, especially if you like what you're doing. So when I knew that the gyms were coming to an end, I actually got opportunities and went on interviews and got job offers for things that were sales or fundraising-esque. So I was speaking with a couple of banks. I was a couple of insurance companies, mutual funds, about getting a job selling something, selling investments or things like that. Things I knew I could do, but before I decided, or before I took it on, I decided, you know what? I just got out of that. Like, am I letting fear control me? Well, I don't have this business anymore. I need a job. Am I going to get right into this place where I'm going to be in an office 9 to 5 in a part of the country that I don't want to live in full time? What am I doing here? And it took an initial, I step back. I need someone else to yell at me and say, Steve, what are you doing? That's what you've been preaching against for a decade. And that's when I decided that if I just stayed around where I was in upstate New York, where my gyms were, I would just go into the same mode. Like there was no reason. I still have family who lives up there, but there's no reason job-wise for me to stay in that area. So I decided, you know what? I'm just going to go somewhere else. And actually, my old landlord recommended, hey, why don't you head to Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg? which is where I am now. And not that I quite, threw a dart against the wall and say, oh, big map, let me pick something. But I looked at about 4 or 5 different cities. I wanted to go somewhere I've never been before, just kind of start fresh. And I decided, hey, if I'm going to go somewhere in the winter in the U.S., I might as well not be cold at all. I don't want to go somewhere that's kind of still cold. So I went to Florida, started doing some work for that, and was able to coordinate with my old landlord, who I stayed in touch with. He saw, hopefully my character over the last 5 years, and especially the last 2 years, how I interacted with him, how I treated him, the problems that I went through, how I still tried to be above and beyond reproach, dealing with customers and dealing with old business partners. And he appreciated that. And he gave me an opportunity to do some work for him. And that blossomed into a little bit more. So right now what I'm doing is that kind of business consulting. It's still not, financially where I want to be, but there's an opportunity here. So that's something I'd love to be able to do. I think you and I joked about before is I'd love to go into a company and say, hey, I can cut $10,000 from your budget by doing X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. How do you sell that? I guess you could just knock on doors and maybe that's the opportunity. But, my experience and my background is in political science. That's in my degree. I don't have experience in cost accounting. My background is not in, finances. So I can say, oh, I promise, I'm really good at this. I'm really good at it. I promise. I've done it for so many people. People don't necessarily want to hear that. So I'm sure something will come up. I'm just looking at the next opportunity. But right now I'm enjoying kind of the fresh start and seeing what's next on the horizon for me.
Yeah, it's really great how I see that you have kind of a common theme going on there. Like back in your career, you were always interested in helping people to save money, to figure that out. And I think alone having that purpose, even though it's not necessarily backed by a degree in particularly that field, right? That means a lot more because you have this intention of actually getting it done. Whereas other people can have the degree, but if you don't have the intention, nothing will happen.
I love it. It's my favorite thing. It's literally, it doesn't bore me. Like I love spreadsheets and I see it every single time as money that's coming from donors or investors. I literally picture that grandmother writing a check for $3.19 because that was literally all she had in her bank account. Not $4, not $3.19 with scribbled handwriting because that's all she could afford.
Exactly.
How could you not use that? Every wasted dollar, drives me nuts because I think of my grandmother. I think of anyone's grandmother. Like, how can you not use that money responsibly? So, what I'm doing now is using donor money. Every dollar that comes in, someone is entrusting you to use that money responsibly. If it's a company with investors, they're trusting you to use that money responsibly. If it's just a company that's run by a single person, and I say, hey, I can save you this much money per week. Well, you could go on a vacation. You could buy your kids new sneakers. You could give health insurance to your employees. Whatever you want to do. All this money that's being wasted, that's actually, like I said, what's your favorite part of being in politics, Steve? It was negotiating the garbage bill. That was my favorite part.
Yeah. And I think that's such an awesome tagline. Not the garbage bill. I mean, this one, money made simple. Because most people think that money is awfully complicated, but then you can actually help them to simplify it and make it like support their life and what they want to do, right? Yeah. So I want to ask about your family and your friends. When you were doing all of this and making these big changes, were they all behind you and supporting you, or did you get some criticism, some opposition maybe from your family, like, Steve, don't do that, that's too risky?
Yes, pretty much. Less criticism in the sense that nothing was negative. There's nothing like that, but a lot of the same responses that other people who write about this and talk about this have gotten is, you can't do that. You can't. Oh, I'm just going to do it. Oh, but what about your career? What about this? What about that? How are you going to make money? How are you going to do this? Well, that country's dangerous, right? It's so ingrained in our head that this is what you do. You, for the most part, most people, they go to high school. Many of them go to college. You get a job. You get a mortgage. You get married. You have kids. You retire, and then you travel. When you're 65 and 70, and then you go to Europe.
When your back aches, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And you don't know what the world is going to be like. Imagine you were 62 a couple of years ago, and you said, "Oh, at 65, I'm going to travel. 62, I'm going to travel." Well, now you're 3-4 years, you may not be able to travel with COVID. You don't know what the world is going to bring. You don't know if you're physically going to be able to walk up the steps to the airplane, much less walk across Europe at 65. True. You don't know if your spouse is still going to be alive at 65 or 70. You don't know if you're going to be alive. You don't know if your kids are going to want to come with you. So there's a balance between not blowing all your cash and at 20 or 30. But I've never met a single person who, when they heard what I was doing, yelled at me. Every single person said the same thing. I wish I could have done that, or I wish I did that, or wow, you're doing it so right. Every single, especially older people. Now, they may have other things that they value. They have houses and kids and things like that. But if they want to travel, if you want to travel to Europe, go to Europe now. Go now, or maybe not now, but go. Like, you have to do these things. You don't know what the world is going to be like. And if you wait to retire 65, 70, and then live your life, well, what have you been doing the last 40 years? Too many people seem like they're kind of just surviving their lives. They're not really living them.
That's true.
And that's what I would encourage people to do.
What would you say to people who care too much about what others will think of them, even though other people might not voice their opinions or criticism, but they're always concerned about, oh, they will think that I'm a loser or that I'm weird. Like, what would you tell them? Like, how should they,
I get that quite a lot, actually, that I'm weird, actually.
Not you particularly,
no,
I mean in general.
I get that quite a lot, that I'm weird or strange or unorthodox. And I've always taken it as a compliment. I've never once. I've usually laughed in people's face, which makes them even angrier because they're not comfortable. Most people are not comfortable in who they are. Most people are not confident, and they're not confident being different. I remember talking with someone, I think I wrote about this, about how I encouraged people years ago to go to the movies by themselves, something that I still do quite often. And often I'll go to the movies and then go out to dinner by myself.
I did that a few times. It's fun.
I'm not opposed to going out to dinner or going to movies with someone, but if there's no one to go, I'm never going to not go out because, well, someone might see me and they may think that, he can't get a friend.
What is he doing there?
Table for one. It's funny, when you go out to dinner, hey, can I sit down for dinner? People say, oh, just one? And
just one?
Not just one. It's me. It's one.
For
not
one.
Just
for
one. Don't demean it like that.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Typically, when people are self-confident about something, or they're not confident about who they are, and that's okay. Someone who criticizes you, that's their battle to face, right? Someone else is usually projecting on you that they couldn't go to the movies by themselves. They couldn't pick up and go to Europe for a week. They couldn't do this. They couldn't do that. That's their battle to face. That's not my battle to face. All right. So people criticizing or saying I'm weird. Hey, absolutely, I'm weird, but I can't talk. I'm on a plane going to India for Holy Festival. Click. I'll take that weirdness any day of the week. That's your problem if you're not confident. You do you. I'm going to do me, type of thing. So don't worry if people are saying well, someone's going to think I'm weird. They probably will. That's their problem. That's not your problem. That's their battle to face. You be who you are, and you can let them be who they are.
Yeah. Totally agree with that. Yeah. Oh my God. There are so many things I actually still want to talk about with you. I have this whole list of questions to go through, but I think because we're at 1.5 hours, I think what we'll do is, if you're up for it, we can do another podcast another time. And if anyone watching this right now, if you're watching this on YouTube, let us know in the comments if you have any specific questions about Steve's journey and his experience in particular, and we might be able to make something specific on that, right? But I have one last question that I want to ask Steve. I think this is something really important before we end, and that is, what advice would you give to those people, and there are a lot of them, who say that I want to do something, I want to change my life, career, do something else, start a business, but I kind of feel like it's too late for me because I'm in my 30s, 40s, 50s, or whatever. Like, what would you tell them so that they don't feel like it's too late and they're too old?
Well, first, I'd say definitely subscribe and listen to the Multiple Careers podcast and YouTube channel. That's the number one thing that they need to do.
Awesome.
I would say there are very few things that it's too late for. And that's probably the number one thing that I got. I mean, that's plastered on my website and my YouTube. It's too late for me. It's too late for me. If you're 70 and you want to be a doctor, it's probably too late. Maybe not necessarily. You hear stories about people going to medical school and becoming lawyers at 70. Probably. If you want to be a race car driver, probably too late at 70, but for very few things, it's too late. It's a lot easier to start today than it is tomorrow. You know, if you want to put money in a savings account, yep, you should have done it 10 years ago, 30 years ago. Absolutely. But it's better now than it will be tomorrow or next week or next month. And speaking from experience, you know, I left my career at 30, which is still relatively young, I think. I still feel pretty young. And I just picked up and went. And then I traveled and I got involved in gyms. And I think, okay, this is going to be successful. And it was not. And at 37, I'm basically starting over. And I don't mind sharing that. It's, you know, the money that I had saved is no longer there. The investments I had are no longer there. They were stolen or spent on lawyers. So it's me like at 37 to be like, oof, like I'm literally starting from scratch. Like what has the last 15 years of my life been to? That's tough to get through. That's tough to get through, but deal with it. You know, there's a saying, you've probably heard, you know, nobody cares, work harder. Nobody cares, work harder. Nobody cares about your problems. No one's going to cry their eyes out. Oh, poor Steve living in the United States in 2022 at 37. Oh, poor. Nobody cares, work harder. And it's never too late to start. And it's always going to be better to start today than tomorrow. If you want to travel the world and you have no savings, you're not going to be able to go next week. It's not going to happen. But if you really scrimped and saved and struggled and made a plan, could you do it in a year? You could absolutely do it in a year because I did it in a year. You could absolutely do it. If you want to start a new career, you know what? You probably can't quit your job and go to, you know, grad school or med school full time, but I bet you could take 1 or 2 classes at night throughout the week. And it may not take you a year. It may take you 6 years, but you can do that. You know, we live in a time where opportunities are really boundless. Don't get caught up on other people. Don't get caught up in, I can never be Jeff Bezos rich. You're right. You will never be that rich, but you can still be rich or wealthy in other things. Hey, I can never do this and that. This person has it all together. Oh, also I jump on is one thing I've kind of experimented with, a social experiment, is no social media at all. I'm completely off social media. All my accounts are either deactivated or deleted or blank. And I highly recommend people consider this. That's maybe not great for promoting, brands or anything like that, because I have YouTube myself and things like that. So I'm just limited to YouTube, but maybe
it's a bit different. It's a bit different, right?
Scale back on it. If you feel like you're spending way too much time just scrolling on stuff, if you go out to dinner on a date or with your spouse, and as the food comes, both of you, the amount of, when I go out to dinner by myself, the amount of people I see, there's a human in front of you, right? Like talk to that human. Go talk to that human. Get off your phone type of stuff. Something like that, I would say, makes a big deal. Just start now. Nobody cares about your excuses. Start now. You can do it.
Awesome.
And watch and listen to the Multiple Careers podcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Awesome. I think this is the perfect way to end this podcast. But before we end, the last thing, where can people find you, Steve Bierfeldt, and how can they connect with you if they want to ask you questions or need your help?
Sure. My website is my name, stevebierfeldt.com. And I am on YouTube. I'm trying to learn myself and make some videos. It's called Money Made Simple, Life Made Simple on YouTube. Easy to find. And if someone wants to chat or has questions, I'd love to talk with them. I genuinely enjoy helping people, and it does keep my mind sharp and mind fresh as well. So I'd be getting just as much out of it from me as they would.
Great. Yeah. Steve, thank you so much again for taking the time and being here. I really, really appreciate it. And it was such a big pleasure talking to you. So all the best for all your plans and your career, your business. So you're awesome.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. And see you again soon. Bye.